Hello, I'm Richard Ridge for BroadwayWorld. My guest is an actress, singer, writer, AIDS activist, one of the most popular former Miss Americas, and is currently the president of Actors Equity. Please welcome my friend, Kate Shindle.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm busy, apparently.
You are very busy.
Yeah,
You didn't think you did all those things, did you?
It's funny to hear them all like one after the other.
Yeah.
But yes, all of them are true.
Now, we are sitting here in your beautiful office.
Great, right?
High atop, Times Square overlooking, the Broadway theaters.
The Hamilton Lottery.
Well, I want to talk about your latest endeavor, which of course is president of Actors Equity.
Sure.
How did this all happen for you?
Wow. The reason I got involved as a counselor, I actually first as a committee member here at Equity, the same way that most of our counselors first get involved. I was working on a show and something went wrong and I didn't know how to fix it. And so I came to a sort of town hall feedback session, and it was actually about the musical theater festival, about NIMF. It was nobody's fault. It was just sort of a miscommunication and some weirdness, and I wanted to know how to deal with it. And then while I was here, someone asked me if I wanted to serve on the Off Broadway committee. So I did. And then a couple years later, I decided I wanted to run for council. And then after a year on council, I ran for Eastern Regional Vice President because that seat was empty. And then I took 3 years away. I stepped down during the last election where I would have been reelected because I had been asked to do some producing.
Yeah.
And so I was an associate producer on Christmas Story. But producing is not really for me. It's just fundraising, not my jam. Although I know that producers do a lot besides fundraise. That was what I ended up doing. And so then when the elections came up again, I thought, yeah, I'm ready to shoot for that. And I ran, and I campaigned for it.
Yeah.
And I feel like with something like this, your entire career is a campaign. And I don't mean that in the calculated way it sounds. It's just, I have always tried to work with people respectfully, to treat my coworkers well, to behave like a grown-up and a professional in rehearsals. And I feel like those are the kinds of things that when people see you're running for an office like this, they remember and they consider you.
See, I didn't realize this is a non-paying position, right?
It is a non-paying position, but I get okay, that was not a surprise.
Yeah.
I do have to remember to make a living.
Sure.
And so finally I just, I had been out of town doing concerts for pretty much the first half of last year. So being out of town doing concerts kind of also meant I was out of town for auditions. So I wasn't working when this happened in May, and I kind of had the summer to settle in and do our production contract negotiations. And then in the fall, I thought I better get back to auditioning because Mama's still got a mortgage, and that view of the ball isn't going to pay it. But the great thing is, as much as I love the actual work of it, there are also just perks I didn't anticipate. I mean, I signed up for the job because I thought it would be something that I would enjoy and would be good at and could work hard at. I didn't do it so that I could get a note saying, hey, do you want comps to the SAG Awards?
Yeah, sure.
But I do. It turns out I do want those too. So it's fun. It's a lot of stuff that I didn't expect, but which in lieu of some kind of salary still makes it like an awesome fun thing to do.
Sure. But it's like every time we try to line up this interview, it's like,
I know.
you're always busy doing stuff. It's like, but you're a working actress looking out for all these actors and actresses. Yeah. It's over, what, 50,000
it's
members of Actors Equity?
More than 50,000 all over the country. And I think that one of the things that you learn when you grow older, unless you are one of 5 people, if you've been working in this business for a while, there's so much theater beyond Broadway.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people who just work on Broadway all the time. And I shouldn't say 5. There are, there are a handful of stars, and then there are the gypsies who just go from one Broadway show to another. But to run this organization, you also have to be looking out for the people who are working on per performance letter of agreements in the Lort theaters, people who have to have day jobs in order to be able to afford to do theater at night in Florida, when they rehearse 4 hours a night, or just people who want to do showcases, all those kinds of things. You have to kind of balance the interests of each particular group with what's best for the greatest number of people in the membership, because that's the point of a union.
What did you want to achieve when you took this job as a working actress looking out for other performers? What did you want to achieve?
I wanted to have a really undecorated office.
Which we see.
Which I have been successful at. What did I want to achieve? It's funny that I kind of feel like once an activist, always an activist, right? And if I see, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's genetic. I don't know if it's personality. I don't know what it is, but I think that once people get passionate about causes and you learn how good that feels and how we can actually do things to make the
Sure.
world a better place, not to sound like Miss America, but to actually do it in real time, it's very hard to walk away from opportunities to make positive change elsewhere. And with equity, I see so many opportunities to, communicate better with our membership, to counteract the fact that our employers have a lot more face time with our members, all of whom really want to work, than the union does. And it becomes very easy, not as a general rule, but it becomes very easy for a few bad apples to blame equity for doing
Sure.
things that are not equity's responsibility or is not an accurate representation of how the union behaves. So educating our membership in terms of what the union does, how to find information, how to trust the union, and then ultimately to have a big tent that people actually just want to be part of because it's cool and it affects our lives every single time we walk into a rehearsal room. I mean, how could you not want to do that? I want to do it. It just kind of gets my jets going.
Sure. I read where you said you hope that equity can play a vital role in what you called a grounding influence. What do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
Well, you know how things work when you're in a show, right? Especially a musical. First day of rehearsal, everybody's best friends. You're going out for margaritas and we're just hanging out and we become just great friends, develop some really deep relationships, and then for one reason or another, when the show closes, most of them go away. You're in that community for the period of time that that the show runs, and then the community kind of disbands. And you still see those people here and there. You may work with them again, but our sense of community is very tied to our individual projects, most of which last a finite period of time. Here in New York, if you're in a Broadway show, you feel like you're sort of more a part of things than you do if you're not in a Broadway show. And for me, the thing to remind people is that we're all part of a community at all times, and that community is this union, which, without the strength and the passion of its members, is just a bunch of people in a beige building making rules. But
Yeah.
if people actually want things to change, they have to not only tell us what they're thinking, but also become active and advocate and say no to things. If they feel like employers should offer a different kind of conditions, well, there's a lot that individual actors can do toward that by saying, you know what, thank you very much, but I'm going to decline that offer. So some of it's the purview of the union, some of it's not. But to me, it's kind of all about encouraging our members to have a voice as creative collaborators
Yeah.
and not just as walking, talking pieces of scenery.
And I love the demographics of Actors Equity. You have
Yeah.
an older generation. You have the 40-year-olds, the 30-year-olds, the 20-year-olds. And everyone's going through different things in their career.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand what you're making it very easier for them to get involved through social media and just really making Actors Equity their union.
Well, we just hired a new social media manager, and he's fantastic.
Yeah,
And
great.
he really, he live tweeted the tax seminar a couple weeks ago, and that is great. For people to just be able to follow on the feed a bunch of tax tips for actors, that's the kind of thing that helps us with internal organizing, for example. Social media is like everything. And like everyone is dealing with in social media, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It's great for people to have places to congregate in which they can talk about things. It's also really easy for inaccurate information to get passed around. So, for example, some of our, we don't have a young workers group like most unions do, but some of our younger counselors started an under 40 Facebook page that's
Great.
unofficial.
Yeah.
It's not something that's sanctioned by the union or run by the union, although it's terrific. And it's kind of been aimed at getting people who traditionally, are of an age group that doesn't really engage with their union or necessarily even understand what they're paying dues for, to come and congregate and ask questions. They have a happy hour once a month. And it's
Wonderful.
it's caused a little consternation among some of our members because 40 is a big age in our business, especially for women. But I think that, I understand that there are people who will push back about any number of different ideas, but as far as I'm concerned, it's way more important to me whether or not it's effective than whether or not everybody likes something. Although we always strive to, make people
Sure.
happy and feel included.
No, I love that you do that, though, because you have these people come together and they talk amongst themselves, amongst the problems they're facing
Yeah.
with getting work or dealing with work.
Well, for example, the decision to get your equity card is a big decision.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of young actors who are nervous that if they get their card, they're going to stop working because they won't be able to be hired as equity actors. That's disappointing, but it's
Yeah.
real. It's a real fear, and it's better for us to admit that that's a fear and talk about it, even in
Sure.
a sort of small protected group, than to pretend it doesn't exist and just get your card and sign up for a committee and go union. It just doesn't work that way. We're a different kind of union from a lot of other unions.
That's why you're so good at what you do.
Oh, thank you.
That activism side.
Ugh.
What path led you to really want this position? Was it just like you said, working as an actress and seeing what was going on in the business?
Yeah, I really like what's going on in the business, but there are always things that could be better. There are a lot of conversations right now about development, about workshops versus labs, about whether actors can get a percentage of future rights on shows that they develop, and that's a big thing that seems to have come to sort of a tipping point. Gender parity, especially on smaller contracts, but across the board, sexual harassment in the workplace, diversity in the workplace, and diversity in casting. Now, we are just launching Equity News, which is our newspaper, as a glossy magazine in the spring. And I think our first issue is focusing on, I'm looking at Josh, who's off camera right here, is focused on sexual harassment. And then I think the second one is focused on diversity, right? And these are issues that are really important to our members, but also, like in council this Tuesday, we're having a conversation about whether Equity should take a position on gun violence and advocating for more responsible gun laws. It's something that seems to mean a lot to a lot of our members. My Facebook feed certainly lights up every time something horrible happens. Is it the right kind of issue for our union, which is primarily focused on performing, to be involved in? I don't know, but I thought it was important to bring to the council, especially after what happened in Paris. People need to feel like they're safe going to work and that they're safe on public transportation and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, and we've taken positions on things like marriage equality and voting rights and civil rights that weren't necessarily directly related to working in the theater, but are important to our members.
Because your members are going through this in their real life.
Yeah, because they care, because we're artists and we're observers and questioners, and when horrible things happen in the world, I think that we're all sort of empathetic toward that. At least our actor members. We also have stage manager members who are also sympathetic, just slightly different and more organized and on time.
They make the show go on time, right?
Oh, yes, they do.
I want to go back to the beginning. So you were brought up in New Jersey.
I was.
So did you fall in love with theater first, or sort of the world of the pageants? Because Miss America was down there.
Yes. That's a good question, because I always say my first love is theater, but my parents started volunteering on Miss America, and as did pretty much everyone we knew in South Jersey when I was 4 or 5 years old. So I was exposed to that, but I didn't compete in a pageant until I was 17. I wasn't like a pageant kid. I was much more along the lines of a drama geek, and that's always been my first love. The pageant thing, it just seemed to be something that I might be good at. It had an interview competition, and I thought, well, I could do that, and I did have a performing talent, and got in shape and walked around in a dress and a swimsuit, and then, but the thing that really lit it up for me was when the platform issue started to position itself front and center, because that was 90% of my year, and that was, as far as I was concerned, the best reason to do it, and kind of almost the only reason to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you were Miss Illinois, you won that first.
Right, because I went to school in Evanston. Mm-hmm.
So that was your first big pageant.
Well, yeah, I had to win a local to get to that position, to get to compete at the state, but that was the first thing. But from the time I won my first local competition to the time I became Miss America was like 6 months. Wow. So it was 6 pretty intense months, but it was definitely, when it happened, it happened.
So I have to ask you about Miss America. You were Miss America.
I was.
What did that whole time mean for you, like going up for that pageant, winning, and like you said, you were an AIDS platform, the AIDS activist was your platform. It was a big one. You're one of the most popular. You go on Google, you're one of the most popular Miss Americas.
Thank you.
Especially for what you stood for. What was that all like for you?
Well, at this point, I'm 39, and then I was 20, right? So it's almost half my lifetime ago. But I would say that there were a couple big lessons. One is that it is, and the thing that I think is, I don't repeat this a lot, but to me, traveling around and celebrating yourself for winning a competition is nothing compared to being able to, actually talk to students and lobby legislators and help with fundraising and feel like you're actually making a difference in something that could save someone's life, The other thing is that I discovered that when I really put my mind to something, I have a decent shot at getting it, and that I just, look, I was going to a competition like everyone else was, and on a different day, they always say different set of judges could pick someone else. But before I got there, I kind of decided that I was going to win, and I think I would have lived if I hadn't. I mean, I think my life would be different. I don't know what I'd be doing, but I think I'd still be doing theater. But just starting to learn, especially at that age, how to have a voice in the world, and that people respect, I believe people respect people who speak their passion, or advocate for things that they're passionate about in a reasonable, thoughtful, respectful way, and I don't know, there was nothing more exciting than that for me.
And then there was your great book.
Oh yeah, which was just last year.
Being Miss America Behind the Rhinestone Curtain.
I know, right?
What did you want to achieve with the book?
Well, the book was actually, the book actually came about when I was an officer the last time, because I went down with our then executive director and another one of our counselors to NYU to speak to a class about unions, and I don't know how the subject turned to Miss America. I honestly don't remember. But after that, the professor asked me if I had ever considered writing a book, because he was editing a series at Yale at the time. And by the time I said, yeah, I'd like to do that, he was moving to University of Texas Press. So their goal is to, produce and create materials that can be used in college classrooms, which is why it wasn't like a big splashy commercial memoir. The book itself it's sort of a hybrid. It's 50% the history and the evolution of the organization and 20th century ideals of femininity and how that grew, and how for a time they were on the same path, and then at a certain point they seemed to diverge, and then the other half is interspersed was my first person experience. So like there was a chapter on Miss America became famous overnight once television entered the picture, and then my chapter on what it feels like to experience that, and suddenly you're a college student, and then suddenly you're not. It was trippy. It was a lot of work. I've always liked writing, but there were a couple points at that process when I did not like writing.
Sure.
It was just, oh my gosh.
It's a big undertaking.
It was.
It's a great book.
Thank you.
So what got you to New York to start theater?
Well, I went back to school after Miss America. I had 1 year left at Northwestern, and I knew I wanted to go back. I knew I wanted my degree. I knew I've said this so many times, like I wanted to go to college football games for 1 more year and do theater in a safe space before I had to be in the business. And that was totally the right decision. And I had come here plenty of times during Miss America, and New York was not far away from where I grew up. It's only a couple hours, but it may as well have been far away because we never came here. But when I kept coming here that year, I just thought, I love it here. I just dig the energy of the city. So I knew when I finished school that I wanted to move to New York, and then I did.
All right, so your first big job in New York was a replacement in the original production of the Frank Wildhorn musical Jekyll and Hyde.
Yes, playing Bet, a scullery maid / a young girl / a whore. I tell you what, the day that I did my first costume fitting, and they showed me that I was wearing like white tights and a thong, it was like, oh! I don't think I've ever done a show with my back against the upstage wall the entire time like I did the first time my parents saw it. So, and I was understudying Lucy, which was really cool, because I'm so tall that when they went to do my first fitting, they were like, oh, just pull Linda's stuff out of storage. And I was like, what? I'm wearing Linda Etter's costumes. So it was fascinating, because you think Broadway is like the be-all, end-all of artistic glory. And going into a long-running show in an ensemble track is, at first and foremost, kind of a mechanical undertaking. You have to learn your staging. You have to, get out of the way of the cart, and you're just you and the stage manager figuring out where you go, and then this sort of acting and performance comes on top of that. But it was great. Are you kidding? It was my first job on Broadway. It was really exciting.
But then, working as Lucy, you went on as Lucy.
I did.
What was that like? Do you remember your first night?
It was an afternoon, and I didn't have a heck of a lot of notice, but I do remember it because I don't know if the producers called the media. It wasn't me, but there was some media in attendance, and our director was in. I never tell this story because it sounds so self-congratulatory, but our director was in town putting in a new Jekyll, and he came out and made a curtain speech at the end that he thought I was good, and then it was in some papers, which was really cool, and kind of helped me get my next job. So that was.
It's nice when that happens, right? Like out of nowhere, like I'm going on a matinee, and all of a sudden, all the big wigs, all the powers that be are there.
Yeah, turns out that's really nice. Yeah. And my next job was the tour of Cabaret, but it was the same producers. So going on in that show kind of helped me get their attention, I guess, for a role that I never thought I'd play. Because I
Yeah.
always thought Sally was a dancer, and I am not a dancer. But in that production, my
You were.
rudimentary level
Yeah.
of dancing ability worked okay.
Rob Marshall dancing. You
Rob
did it.
Marshall is
Right?
the day,
Yeah.
as I progressed through that sort of audition process, like a work session with this one and then an audition with that one, and eventually I got to Rob, and then this was not even a year after I graduated, but my agent called and said, what are you doing for Memorial Day weekend? I said, well, I was thinking of going to Chicago and hanging out with my friends. She's like, how about we have you flown to London to audition for Sam Mendes? And I was like, oh, that sounds better. Let's do that. So
You had to do that?
I did. It was so exciting. And I'd never been to London, and it was so cool.
Well, then you got to work with Frank Wildhorn again.
I did.
When you came back, when he did Wonderland
I did,
here.
yeah.
Playing the Mad Hatter. Great
Yeah.
clothes, too,
Great
you
clothes,
had. Great
yeah.
number.
Yeah. It was, that was I was so excited about it. I'm so happy I did it. But there are some real complexities in terms of producing these days, and I think that it gives me a lot of respect for people who can really successfully keep all the balls in the air in terms of balancing all the interests of, the audience, the cast, the investors, the
Sure.
producers, the creatives. It's not an easy thing.
What are you the proudest of with being the president of this incredible organization?
I think that some of the technological advances that we're starting to look at are going to be really important to our members. We're well into the process of getting our online signups for our required auditions, which it seems to me we're so overdue for that, but it's, we as an institution have moved slowly in the past, at times, not all the time, but getting our members and our council to really embrace things that I think are great opportunities for us, and to give people access to these auditions who live too far away to come in and write their name down, just to write their name down on a piece of paper, that they'll still be able to come to those auditions. The other thing that's really on my mind, aside from we're doing some strategic planning and some focus groups and development questions, diversity, and all the things we've talked about, is that I think, and this is going to be a big ask and a pretty heavy lift for us to figure out what we're comfortable with, but I personally feel that we have to expand our reach beyond people who can come and see shows in person, or else I worry for the future of our business model. I mean, tickets are getting more and more expensive, entertainment is getting more and more personalized, and we have to figure out how we can preserve theater as a live experience while opening it up to more larger audiences, whether it's what the National Theater is
Yes.
doing with streaming, whether it's online content, and I think that'll help our members too, because we'll finally have some footage on YouTube that's not illegal and bad.
Exactly.
So it's we're always going to have some hardliners who feel that if you're not in the room, it doesn't count as theater. But I think Legally Blonde was successful with the MTV broadcast
Huge.
because MTV filmed it for their audience, and my greatest dream is for theater to be filmed the way that NFL games are filmed. Like a really active sort of part of the action, high tech, not just the old model of planting a couple cameras in the back of the house, which is, to be fair, is pretty much extinct.
Yeah.
Even they're bringing in all kinds of different equipment for
Sure.
for shoots, but that is it's a priority. But of course, I'm technically the head of the council, but our council is 83 people. And so I don't get to make, that's our board. But they're passionate and they're thoughtful, and everybody wants to be heard, and everybody wants to try and represent the membership in the best way. So just because I want it doesn't mean it can unilaterally happen. But I think that we have to think really hard about it.
You're also a working actress. Now you're going to be trying to juggling, getting a job, being the president, taking care of, 50,000 members. I mean, what are the challenges of that?
Well, we'll find out.
Yeah.
I just got a job, and I can't tell you what it is
Okay.
yet. But it will be challenging. But you know what? You just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, part of the thing that I think has become complicated about the presidency is that it is a full-time unpaid job, if you allow it to be. And if you don't, then the institution will adjust. It's good for the president of Equity to be working. It's good for the industry, it's good for the union, and it's not bad for me because I have
Exactly.
a mortgage. But you can allow yourself to be limited by all of the what ifs, where you can just dive into it and say, okay, I'm not going to anticipate every hurdle, but when the hurdles go up, we'll figure out how to jump them.
You make it all work.
You just got to make it work. Otherwise, you make yourself crazy.
Yeah.
And I've said this a number of times. I think people are probably getting tired of hearing it, but like, we have put a man on the moon. We can figure out how to do plays and musicals. We're going to be good.
That's great.
Yeah.
My final question is, what is the best bit of advice that you've been given that you live by?
Whoa. I don't know. I can't think of it, and I know I have them. And this is not a trick question.
Yeah.
I would say that one of the things that's been really valuable to me is everything happens for a reason. But I actually heard somebody talking about something Chris Jackson said at a talk back not too long ago. And it was essentially, they were repeating it to me, so I may not be quoting him directly, but just work harder than anybody, and then you'll get what you want. I don't disagree with that. And the other thing that I tell myself is, when I'm sort of facing a challenge that I don't know how to get past, it's like, lots of people have figured this out.
Yeah.
Talented people, untalented people, smart people, not smart people, you can figure this out. Just, keep applying yourself to it and get there.
Perfect. This has been so wonderful.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thanks for sitting with me.
My
The best.
pleasure.